Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to attend this session. This is a research effort of TechMex. The presentation that we are going to be looking today is Mexico open source contribution. My name is Alex Gonzalez, and I just said TechMex is the nonprofit organization that helps Mexican engineers to raise. A brief introduction of myself is that I'm one of those who has studied 100% in Mexico, got my college degree there and my master's in CENIDET, which is a research center, and have been lucky to work for American companies such as EMC, Gesang, Cloudera, and Parallel Staff, and outsourcing company. Now, I had contributed in open source encryption systems and had reported and coordinated the resolution of more than 200 security issues on third-party libraries for the entire Hadoop ecosystem through different components such as Hive, Sentry, Ranger, Atlas, and more. Also, dozens of security issues being coordinated and resolved for Cloudera's proprietary code. Now, let's start with the challenge that we have in Mexico. The challenge is to promote open source contributions by Mexican developers. You will see in a second in the next slide that Software Guru, the most important software digital magazine in Mexico, had driven a survey where the question was, if you're in Latin America but you use but do not contribute to open source projects, what's the reason? And the answers from the developers is the main reason is that they don't feel they have the skills. They don't know, as a second reason, they don't know how to contribute. There is no information in Spanish, and they don't work for free. That's the categories that we were doing that. So this is the challenge, and this is the problem that we're stating, and we're taking steps. And I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation what are steps taken. Now, what can you expect from this presentation? I'm going to show you who from Mexico is working on open source, what projects are Mexicans contributing to, and how you can help. Some general statistics is that over the past year, 10 million new developers have joined the GitHub community, and they are contributing to 44 million repositories, and 80% of the contributors are not or are contributing outside of the United States. So this last statistic, I like it because it shows that open source projects belong to everybody and nobody at the same time. Maybe we should name it as quantum source, if you get it. Now, in this slide, I'm showing you what are the most popular Mexico open source projects. Today, by the end of the day, you will have on Twitter, if you follow TechMex Austin, these slides. So these links are going to be available to you. And the ones that I picked are the ones that I want to talk about right now. The first one is Aurra. In short, this is a framework that helps to create a front end by decomposing it through micro apps or micro front end services such as network overload, issues resolution, banners display, page refresh, etc. The second one that I picked to talk about is Drupal Console. And this is a CLI suite of tools to generate boilerplate code. Boilerplate are sections of code that have to be included in many places with little or no alteration. As you can see, this is a very popular project with multiple or millions of downloads, multiple releases, and multiple contributors. The top 3 contributors that this project has are Jesus, Eduardo, and Omar. You can see the one at the top, which is Jesus. He has multiple stars. He's a well-recognized contributor, as well as has several followers. Now, in Toto, it's the next project that I'm going to talk about. The name is funny because in Toto, if you kind of translate it to Spanish, means in everything. And that's pretty much what InToto does. So this is a framework to secure the integrity of software supply chains. It does so by verifying that each of the tasks in the chains are carried out as planned. And it uses and has a project lead for each of the chains, and also uses fingerprints for each of the steps. So it's kind of like a workflow validation. The next one that I want to talk about is the update framework, which is another project where Mexican developers contribute to. This is a framework that helps developers to maintain the security of software update systems, providing protection even against attackers that compromise the repository or signing keys. This is hosted by Linux Foundation and is used by important companies such as Cloudflare, Docker, DigitalOcean, IBM, Microsoft, VMware, etc. There is also Apache whackamole. The name it's a funny name. This is a clientless remote desktop gateway. Just a brief mention. The government is also contributing to open source. I'm going to mention two organizations, government organizations. The first one is the Genomic Medicine National Institute. This one has 40 repositories, and some of the repositories or projects are related to data science projects with R, genomic algorithms implementation, and also statistic calculation. The next one is Open Mexico, or México Abierto, which has 207 repositories on GitHub, and the projects are related to metadata validations, engines for MongoDB, also has data access points for government data sets, and as well it has Ansible playbooks to deploy CEPH or Ceph, which is a distributed file system. Now, there is a site called commits.top, which is gathering information about the main committers around the world. And in the top 10, based on their stars and the number of followers, you can find Carlos Tochtli. Carlos Tochtli is listed with 6,000 commits, around 6,000 commits in the last year. He created a repository where he was actually automating the commits for reasons in a repository, in a public repository. That's why he has a lot. But it's worth to mention him since he has multiple followers, as well as has been active in more than 1,000 repositories. In the same website, which is commits.top, you can find that it's listed per country, which are the contributors, the top contributors, in two different views. One is the independent developers that are on GitHub, and you can find Zero Dragon with 10,000. You will see in a second why 10,000. This guy did something really interesting. And Carlos, of course, is there, Carlos Tochtli, that I just mentioned. And in the top 20, I was very happy to see that we have a woman, which is Elizabeth Villalejos. Elizabeth is a full-stack software engineer, and she works with React, JavaScript, Ruby, Redux, and Ruby on Rails. As I said, in a different view, in the same commits.top, you can find Victor Alfredo, who I'm going to talk about in a second, Zero Dragon, and on the right side of this slide, you can see the organizations that they are part of or members of, such as Wiseline, Michelada, Golang MX. At the very bottom, you can see Open Mexico, MX Abierto. Now, this is what I was talking about in regards to Zero Dragon. This guy on the top right of your screen, you can see that there is a repo called GetDrawing, and he automated his commits in order to draw the Martian, the mushroom, the heart, and his signature, which is Ziggy. It was super fun for me. Now, here it is, Victor Torres. As you can see, and based on his description, or profile description, or bios, you can see that he says that whatever people say I am, that's what I am not. So I'm going to let the numbers speak by themselves. You can see that he has several stars and followers. And while I was doing this research, I noticed that on his repositories, his areas of interest, or the ones that he has contributed are particle detector algorithms. SpaceX REST API is also in his repositories. He has forked it. Several repos of mathematical algorithms that I'm not even going to mention because those are way beyond my understanding. And the previews that I mentioned are independent contributors, but there is another model, which are people that get hired by companies to contribute or solve customer issues. And this is the case of Sergio Peña. Sergio Peña is a member of TechMex as well, and he works for Confluent. He contributes to the project KSQL, or Kafka SQL, for streaming. And in the past, he has worked at Cloudera, and he became as PMC of Sentry and PMC of Hive. Another contribution that Sergio and I worked together with was Navigator Encrypt, which is a Linux kernel encryption system that sits on top of eCryptFS and dmcrypt, which is a really, really interesting project. Worth to mention as well that we have another member in TechMex that participates as a contributor of Firefox. He has been working several years with his collaboration, and his name is Alex Mallorca. Now, if in this heat map, you can see the people that has marked themselves as available for hire on GitHub. As you can see, there are several people or several contributors of Mexico based on this heat map. If you are lucky, you can maybe hire any of the ones that I just mentioned, including me. Yeah. Now, I'm going to talk about the active communities that are in Mexico. I'm not going to mention all of them in this slide. As again, if you want to check this out and follow the links, this is going to be available on Twitter following TechMex Austin. And I picked some of these, which are the ones that I want to talk about. The first one is GNULinux Mexico. They have several activities and webinars on meetups, such as the SE Linux on Yellow, listed over here, that happened last May. It's a very active community. Also, there is LabSol, which is an open source lab. This one has 10 branches around Mexico in different cities. There is 216 open source projects created. 44 universities have contributed, and there is more than 500 students listed as contributors. The next one is Awesome. Oso means bear in Spanish, and this is open source Mexico. And the culture that they have is open source first. They have several meetups from meetup.com that I'm going to show in a second. And the next community that I'm mentioning here is the one from Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is one of the most, if not the most, techie university with the better plans. And they have a very strong community for Linux. Now, I'm listing per city the different meetups that we can find on meetup.com. and are related to open source, such as Open Infrastructure is in Mexico City, CDMX is Mexico City. There is also API Addicts, and there is also many Uber engineering events, which we know that has some open source projects over there. And also in Guadalajara, which is the city of the mariachi and the tequila, we have Awesome, the open source Mexico. There is a meetup in particular, the one in blue, that is the open source meetup for Guadalajara. They also have interest in Jenkins. They have interest in Linux and Solar. If you on the top right, you can see that Solar, Mahout as well are in there. So in Monterrey, there is also an open source meetup specific for that. They have interest in Jenkins. And something that I like a lot from Monterrey community, or one of the meetups, and actually it's a great community, a big community, is the Women Who Code. This is probably the chapter that is more active in Mexico of Women Who Code. Now, the IBM and Tecnológico de Monterrey also offer support services to Latin America community in regards to multiple open source projects. The ones that are listed on your screen are the ones that they are offering support services for. Now this is the part where I'm gonna show you how you can help. Basically, in TechMex, we are making the efforts to align the need of contributing into open source and trying to educate and help into the Mexican community of developers. So you can follow us on Twitter. That's one way. Second way is that you can participate in the different summits that we have there, such as the Latin America Festival for open source installation, open source software installation. This is Flyso. Another important summit that we have is cause.org, which is Contributor Summit. And in particular, Contributor Summit has some specific goals this year, and this is going to happen in October 2020. They are planning to select 20 open source projects, and for each of them, they are planning to develop documentation guidelines in Spanish for contributing to open source projects. And also they are planning to host online workshops where committers guide participants. This is also going to be an event, a virtual event. And the plan is to have new participants into making their first pull request and also making their first commits. It's also desired to mentor and motivate participants to continue contributing in open source projects. It's also, now that I'm mentioning the goals, the ultimate goals for this summit, I've been recently, and I didn't add that in the slides because it was after I shared with Linux Foundation these slides. I've been talking with a university who is very interested in making their research efforts as open source code. They are planning and making a plan to legacy or old projects, make them or submitting them or uploading them into GitHub as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a research effort done by TechMex, and I would like to show appreciation to Mara, Ismael, Sarah, Natalia, and Pedro. If you have any question, I will be open to see on the Q&A box, and I appreciate your attention to this. If you don't have any question for now, that is not showing in my box, in my window, you can find me on Slack. I will be here the 4 days, or you can find me on my Twitter, which is Kozlex, Kozlex. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Megan. Bye. That was easy.